Welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is the problem with problem solving. But it's a great conversation, I think, because when we're in a problem solving mode, we're focused on the problem rather than the fact that that problem might be a symptom of something greater. And we get to look at a bigger picture. So we're going to be doing bigger picture thinking today. And before we get started, let's just take a couple minutes to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the pressure, the motion, the temperature, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, today we are talking about the problem with problem solving. And we've spoken about this before, but this conversation today comes from a conversation I had yesterday that was really interesting. Talking with someone who is in an organization that is looking to transcend the limits of the patriarchal and prejudicial kinds of structures that we are prey to, patriarchy and racism, sexism, and we were talking about addressing this, and they were saying, how do we essentially fight these things? And we came to the awareness that if we're fighting those things, we're just enmeshed in them, right? We're affirming them over and over. And what this person had said was that they, in fact, were looking at what the system would look like if it were actually working. And we came to the awareness that fighting those elements is kind of fighting symptoms. It's kind of it's playing whack-a-mole, because those ways of thinking and being, while very deeply entrenched in our systems, are not, they're a function of something else. They came out of something else. And what it looks like to me is, if we look at our origin story, the Judeo-Christian origin story, we started off behind the 8 ball in a really big way. We were bad and we got kicked out of the garden and kind of were being punished from the get-go, right? So if we believe in the notion of original sin, then we have to spend our lives atoning for something because we're not good enough, because we were bad, because we have to redeem ourselves. And it's very interesting. Also, part of that story is that the earth belongs to us, as that our job is to steward the earth, or that it's here for our purposes, and not something that is vital and alive in and of itself. And we are part of nature, a greater system. And also very deeply entrenched in our origin stories are wars and combat and strife between peoples, and separation from God when we got kicked out of the garden, and separation from ourselves. And so if we look at that story, there's so much there that explains our contemporary dynamics. And the thing is, that's not the only creation story in the world. Different cultures have different creation stories, and their perspective on life and the world is quite different as a result of those creation stories. So, for example, and I'm not an expert in this arena, so please forgive me if I misrepresent. It's not it's due to naivety or ignorance rather than any kind of malice. But in indigenous traditions, their human beings are brother and sister to the four-legged creatures and the scaled creatures and the feathered creatures and the water and the sky and the elements, and that everything has this great aliveness to it, and we are all related. And what a different sensibility that relatedness generates for us experientially. To come into the world with that view, we have a very different relationship to the world around us. We can't own a brother or sister, right? We can't be just raping and pillaging the earth. And we have a deeper regard for life, the cycles of life, respect for life. It's a very different perspective. So if we look at the problem with problem solving in looking at the problems of our world is looking at how to cure racism, for example, or how to find how to cure the patriarchy. And the thing is that if we're just looking at the functions of the patriarchy, then we might try to implement some different structures in our governance, for example, or we might require quotas, or we might enact different laws and constraints. But the thing is that there's still this foundational conditioning in terms of our creation story, in terms of what the meaning is in our world and in our lives, that perhaps is more causative. And maybe we can generate a new story of being that enables us to be participating in life as whole beings instead of as bad children that need to prove their worthiness. which breeds all kinds of competition and insecurity and on and on. So if we just keep going backward to be looking at the bigger picture and the systems that are at play, then we might also, rather than trying to fix that system, maybe what we can do is to put our attention on a system that works, that is generative, that supports the values that we hold. And I don't know how to reconcile the whole religion thing, because so many, I mean, there's some beautiful, beautiful aspects of religious tradition, and there's a factionalism that can often emerge from that, not of necessity for most religions, but how do we find communion with one another in a world that is growing increasingly smaller because of our ability to communicate so readily with one another? So when we think about problem solving, I think the thing that can be powerfully effective is zooming out many, many levels to get to a place where we can see more broadly, where we can recognize a broader landscape. So, for instance, you might be in a little thicket and it seems very dense, and there's no sunlight coming in, and the inclination might be to chop down the trees until you zoom back and you see that that little thicket is surrounded by meadowland, and maybe there would be an opportunity to just go and enjoy the sunlight where the meadowland was, by looking in a narrow focus. We miss the big picture. And regenerative thinking, and this is a big movement now, is regenerative thinking, regenerative farming, regenerative law, regenerative everything, pretty much, enables us, or is about looking at the living systems and how those systems interact. So we can even be looking at our families and our relationships within our families and see the dynamics. And we can be very, very focused and very overwhelmed with certain personal dynamics. But then if we are able to stand back to see the broader picture, we're able then to recognize some things at play that wouldn't otherwise have been visible. And so that's the issue around problem solving, is that it is a game of whack-a-mole. It's a game of trying to deal with symptoms rather than a fundamental cause. So we can see that in our health system. Our health system is very much oriented to symptomatic relief in many, many ways, right? We have a problem with our digestion, so we take something to make it feel better, instead of maybe looking at what it is we're eating that might be causing that issue. looking at the bigger system to see how all these different components, all these different elements are interacting with one another dynamically. And so when we look at the challenges in life that we face, what we can perhaps allow ourselves to do is to look at the bigger picture, look at the different things that are at play, the interplay of things. And what happens often is that we gain literally a different perspective. And as I said earlier, we get to see things that we didn't see before. We get to have a new awareness, a new context for understanding what kind of intervention might make a big difference. So it's kind of thinking about an acupuncture point. A certain acupuncture points affect the meridians that they're on, and there are certain acupuncture points that kind of radiate their impact out throughout the greater system. And if we can be looking at the issues in our lives that present in that way, to be looking for where that acupuncture point might be, where's the one straw that you can pull that will allow the whole structure to shift, collapse, get rebuilt, whatever, then that's an economy of action, shall we say. So in the work that I do with clients, people come presenting problems, and this is a problem or that's a problem. And what we do is we explore what might be underlying that problem, that perceived problem. What might be the acupuncture point that would impact that problem and radiate out throughout their entire lives, because we often have these dynamics in our lives that affect everything. So, for example, maybe we're having issues at work with not being acknowledged, and maybe we're having issues with friends where we feel we're being taken advantage of, and on and on. And maybe the foundational issue is unworthiness. And so if there's a way that we can address that foundational issue, it then trickles out into everything, in interpersonal relationships, in performance at work, in maybe better self-care, all kinds of things, by finding that acupuncture point. And the way that we do that is by getting a greater overview that then allows us to find that one place, find that one thing. And maybe that's an oversimplification. Certainly it's not always just one thing. But sometimes, or in much of my experience, it is one thing that shifting that can shift everything. So going back to our systems, what would it look like to have a system that worked where the issues around patriarchy and racism and sexism were not part of that system? What would it look like? What would it look like to where they not only weren't part of it, but they would have no place there, like they wouldn't emerge? Because I tend to believe, or at least I'm exploring that, of course, given our foundations, of course, this would be the way that our culture would express. So what kind of new story can we create that will generate the culture we envision? What is the culture we envision? We're so deeply steeped in the history and traditions of the cultures that we have, and are often very attached to them and very identified with them and their rightness. And I think that we can look around and see that there's a huge cost to that rightness, that things aren't really working so well, that we have wars where atrocities are occurring on all sides. It's unavoidable in war itself. I mean, why, like, look at what we accept as a norm. So maybe we get to step outside and think beyond the structures that exist to be generating something new. Buckminster Fuller, I believe, said, don't try to fix the systems that exist. Create something new that is so compelling that people will receive it. And I think that's what we're tasked with, is to generate something so compelling that people will make different choices. And so much of this is finding ways to communicate beyond our polarities, beyond our differences, to find this higher perspective that enables us to see the deeper dynamic, the deeper interplay. Because hurt breeds more hurt, violence breeds more violence. And I think we can say that love breeds more love. So what do we want to bring into the world? Pretty challenging time. It's when we have these extreme examples of violence and our darkness that we are called to even more passionately call forth the light. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please Oh, and that's on each weekday morning. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And I deeply, deeply appreciate the opportunity to have these inquiries and conversations and explorations together. It's just such a gift, and I'm deeply grateful. So until next time, so much love to you.